I've lived in Weggis for almost 15 years now, long enough to watch the seasons blur into each other around Lake Lucerne like watercolours bled from the Alps. My husband, Marcus, was born here. The cottage belonged to his grandparents, perched just above the village with a postcard view of Pilatus. After he passed in late autumn, I stayed. People thought it strange. Too many memories, they whispered. But that was exactly why I couldn't leave. The lake held them. The wind through the pine trees held them. Even the steep path I walked every morning seemed to echo with the sound of his boots behind me. We had practiced astral projection together for years, quietly, privately, never speaking of it to others. It had begun as a tool for meditation, something to help him cope with chronic pain in the years leading up to his diagnosis. Eventually, we both crossed that invisible threshold, learned how to separate thought from body, how to return. We stayed close in those moments, tethered by intention. We never ventured far. After his death, I stopped. I couldn't imagine that space without him. But 3 months ago, I began again. It was not planned. One night, the wind rose strange off the lake, full of static and scent, pine resin and snow. I sat alone in the dark, breathing deep, feeling my limbs grow heavy, my thoughts light. There was no tape, no frequency, just memory. And then I was outside of myself. The sensation returned exactly as I remembered. A brief vertigo, like the floor falling away, followed by a stillness so complete I thought it might swallow me. I hovered above my body for a moment, then drifted toward the window. Beyond the glass, the lake stretched out like a pane of ink, and the mountain stood sharp and dark beyond it. Something called me outward. The door was no barrier, nor was the cold. I floated out across the stone steps, the pines bending slightly as I passed. My consciousness spread wide. I wasn't walking, I was carried. The air had substance in that form. Thought-guided movement. Down the trail, past the church, toward the lake. In this state, time didn't flow the same. It wasn't frozen, just irrelevant. I passed trees and lights and boats tied to docks, though the docks seemed older than they should have been. Wood warped, lanterns instead of electric lamps, figures in clothes from another era moving faintly along the shore. Shadows of the past, maybe. Echoes. I wasn't afraid. I simply followed the current of whatever had stirred me. I came to the edge of the lake, just before the trail curved toward Hertenstein. The wind stilled, the water rippled, dark and glassy, and then something changed. It began as a shape beneath the surface, light, then movement, a pale form rising. I expected fear, but instead I felt recognition, not in the mind, in the soul. I stepped or drifted closer. The figure emerged slowly, not from the water, but from behind it, as if rising through layers of memory. It was Marcus, not quite him, not exactly as I remembered. Younger, healthier, his features sharper, more defined, and yet suffused with something I never saw in life. Absolute peace. He didn't speak, but the connection was immediate, wordless, deep. I felt it not as hearing, but as knowing. And with that knowing came a surge of sensation, memories long buried resurfacing. The first snowfall in our garden, the scent of his workshop, the way he used to trace small circles on my wrist when he couldn't sleep. He looked at me, through me, and then past me. I turned. There were others behind me. Shapes in the dark, not frightening, not lost, just waiting. I realized I had drifted across something, a threshold, a place in that in-between space where the living and the departed sometimes brushed hands. I had not meant to come here, but I had been allowed. I turned back to him, and this time he reached out, not with arms, but with presence. A warmth wrapped around me, pulsed in my chest, where the ache of his absence had lived for months. It didn't vanish. It softened. And then, something unexpected happened. I saw myself, not back in the cottage, not floating, but in memory. A different kind of projection. I saw myself a year earlier in the hospice room, holding his hand as machines clicked and whispered around us. I had cried silently, not wanting to disturb his peace. I had thought he hadn't known. But he had. He'd been there, watching me mourn even as he passed. The vision flickered. I saw our first kiss, our last argument. The night we lay on the frozen balcony, wrapped in a blanket, listening to the owls. Each moment layered atop the last, until it was too much. I couldn't hold it all. Then he was beside me again. Just his presence. It wasn't a goodbye. It was a completion. The space around us folded inward, like mist rolling back into the mountains. I felt myself pulling away, like the tide retreating from shore, not by force, by understanding. I was being returned, back through the lake, back along the trail, past echoes of time and into the body that waited for me in the cottage. I opened my eyes slowly. The room was still. The air smelled faintly of snow. My fingers were warm, my heart steady. And for the first time in months, I didn't feel alone. I knew then I wouldn't need to do it again. Not like that. I had been given what I came for, even if I hadn't known I was searching. Marcus was not lost. He was home. And now, so was I.